I don't like when I like can't be interactive. You know what?
You
I
were
think I could
saying, Meg?
update that. Well, for I don't like having a live where I can't see the comments. So like Substack, I can't see any of the comments pull in. Instagram, I can't see any of the comments pull in. And so then it's like if I can't interact or get the feedback or whatever, you know, I'm just weird. It's just very specific.
No, it's not
But
weird. It's weird, but that's why we got to get people from our Instagram to come to places where we can see the comments and we get support. We'll have to figure out
yeah.
how we're going to do this better. I don't know. I feel like we're growing though. I was looking at our hey everybody. Welcome to Party Crashers. I am Steve. I don't even know why I introduced myself. It's not like we're the majority report. Would love to get Emma Vigland on here and Sam. I don't think Sam Cedar does any like appearances though.
Maybe he does, but maybe we could get Emma. Um what was I gonna say? Oh, our opening song. I feel like I have to change it so that the music gets like paint splash as it's, and then it ends with the logo.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
like a
mean?
drop. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that like a
I was in the
Jackson
car with
Pollock
my guy.
piece. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock. We got to talk about Jackson Pollock sometime. Why is there? Oh, there's dirt on my lens. That's driving me
I
crazy.
see
Hang on
that.
a sec. It's crazy. Did I get it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I got it. All right, all right. We are live. So Meg, we are going to be doing something a little bit different. You can't hear me, Shirley. That's because you just got in here and you're just looking at the. Can you hear me now? You should join us on YouTube. You could definitely hear us. 9 people on Instagram, where Mark Zuckerberg is famously censoring us, and we don't get any support. I got to go to college, you all. Can't you tell? I'm a 37-year-old man who needs to get back into school, make my dreams come true. Come support us on YouTube or Twitch. Literally, just watching us on Twitch is support.
yes.
All
Okay.
right. Meg,
So, should we catch up a little bit first before we get into the thing?
yeah, I mean, I think we should tell our audience what we're thinking now for our new neurodivergent. Well, yeah, let's just catch up. Let's not overthink it. That's what you're always telling me. What do you want to
Yeah, we
talk
don't
about?
have to overthink it. Well, catching up, we are we're kind of like pivoting the way we're doing things now because um, the headlines are increasingly depressing. For example, you know, I've been following the Nolan Wells case. I've been following police killings. I've been following the fact that another Black man was found hanging from a tree in Raleigh. Oh, I should add a disclaimer. This is going to be heavy content. So if that makes you feel uncomfortable and you are not a Black person, you're a white person who just needs to feel uncomfortable, stay. White people, anybody who's been subjected to racial violence, this may trigger you. Just warning. Okay. But it is getting really hard to just be reactive to the constant pain and violence in our news cycle. And a lot of it, it's like we can't really fix anything until we address the root causes, history, do deep dives, especially as our current government is trying to erase Black history, civil rights history. And so
Pretty much
we,
all history that doesn't
yeah,
fit into their narrative of like
white savior, white supremacy history is the only one left.
pretty much.
So
You know what's
in
crazy? I learned about like Pan Africanism and Marcus Garvey and like the Pan Arab movement in APUS history class. Like I learned about all that shit.
mhm.
My teacher taught us about Booker T. Washington. They taught us about Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers and like the Head Start program that the Black Panthers invented. I learned all that in APUS history class. I knew who Stokely Carmichael was. Like I was blessed with a good public education, but I think about all the time if anybody's learning that shit now, and I can't imagine that they are.
Well, I never learned that shit. I went to all Christian schools. The first Christian school I went to was from first through fifth grade, and they used the same curriculum that like the South was using, Bob Jones University, which banned interracial marriage until 2000, by the way, like a very racist curriculum.
Till what?
2000, interracial dating was banned on campus. You could not date interracially. Um,
Oh God.
that was like where I learned elementary school history. I actually like pulled up some of that stuff because like if we're talking about like this is how people are learning shit now. Um, but
Hey, if you're joining us on YouTube or Twitch, say hi in the comments. You'll win a little prize that we're making. We're making art for people who come and say hi. So it's pathetic. People go to a country founded by white people to complain about white supremacy rather than stay in your. Oh, Justin, you're such an incel. Don't come into our chat with
well,
that.
yeah, this is just obviously a bad faith actor, but it was founded by white people. No, people were already fucking here. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was taken over by white. It was colonized by white people. That's not founded. That is an
Mm-hmm.
invasion. Let's get rid of this guy.
Oh.
Got rid of him.
Ah, Justin, you could have won some art if you came correct and curious. If you come here with your preconceived notions and they're
Without
his,
curiosity.
without curiosity, if you come in here judgmentally and not curious, Meg is just gonna put you on your ass intellectually. She'll send you to therapy.
Absolutely will.
I
Um,
promise. I've seen her
look at.
do it.
I'm gonna pull up like some clips of like the history book that I. Yes, the current USA is colonized, and not all countries should not be colonized. We need to stop stealing other people's resources and land, and you know. Anyways, I'm not. I need to stop. Okay, tell me when I should address a comment. Otherwise, I'm gonna
No,
post
no,
it.
no. Keep commenting. I'm gonna deal with the comments. Just me and Maples, MPL. Oh, in Minneapolis. I don't know. Yes, all countries are colonized, even current USA. That's absolutely correct. It's
Okay.
absolutely correct. Actually, if you even look at a map, it's colonized. I could explain that later. But it was basically. Hang on a second, Meg. There's a special one for you. Because you use. Okay, perfect. Tell me what I'm looking at right now.
Okay, so this is actually, I'm pretty sure this was my history book in eighth grade too. But this is how I learned history. So there was Abeka, which has provided millions of Christian schools with textbooks since 1972. Abeka was a segregationist academy curriculum. So when Brown versus Board of Education passed and schools had to desegregate, um, white Southerners started to come up with segregation academies where it was only white people allowed. And that's where like the whole school vouchers fight came from, because they were like, we don't want our tax dollars going to the public schools where black people are. We want our tax dollars to go to our white segregation academies.
And
And they had their own curriculums. So this is the kind of shit that was in those curriculums, which still, when I was in school, was in mine. Um, they said things like that slaveholders treated their slaves well. Although the slaves faced great difficulties, many found faith in Christ and learned to look to God for strength. By 1960, most slaveholders provided Christian instructions on their plantations. God gave the Christian slaves the ability to spiritually combine African heritage of song with the dignity and power of Christian practices. Through the Negro spiritual, the slaves developed the patience to wait on the Lord and discovered that the truest freedom is in the freedom from the bondage of sin.
that's disgusting.
It is
Clearly, they
so
didn't teach.
fucking
They didn't
disgusting.
teach the history of Haiti.
The story of slavery in America is an excellent example of far reaching consequences of sin. The sin in this case was greed on part of African tribal leaders, on part of the slave traders, and on part of the slave owners, all of whom allowed their love for profit to outweigh their love for their fellow man. They're literally just trying to do everything they can to like deflect.
Oh,
It's
they're
so
teaching that to kids.
this is what I was raised on, and this is what is still like in schools in Mississippi, honestly.
Oh, Jesus
Um,
Christ, that's horrible.
it is really horrible. Look, the slave who knew Christ had more freedom than a free person who did not know the Savior. Like, excuse me?
You got everybody should read the book. There's this book called Jesus Christ and John Wayne, the history of evangelical Christianity in like the 20th century, and it talks a lot about how the white evangelical movement co-opted abortion, like James Dobson and all them. Like basically in the 70s, like some evangelicals were pro-choice and others were uh, zealots, and then basically once they desegregated schools, they made abortion like their issue because they couldn't make segregation their issue. But then they were basically creating this charter school system in the background so that they could continue to keep stuff segregated. Um, God, that's gross. It's like I've
So
never seen an actual textbook. We have 26 people watching right now. Thank you for jumping in. Be sure to say hello. We're going over history that you didn't learn about in school, or you might have, but we all need a refresher.
So Bob Jones University, which again, my first Christian school used them. I think my second one did too. My second one was not as out like racist. It was just more like color blindness, but this is just racist. But color blindness is also
Wait,
racist, but we'll
it's
get to
called
that.
Bob Jones University. Is it does like sound like the like yokel like Bob Jones. How you doing? My name's Bob Jones from Bob Jones Chevrolet. This is my wife cousin, Hetty. Uh, yeah, that sounds like
Yeah.
some real redneck shit. All right.
So one thing that they said in their 2001 edition of History for Christian Schools is the KKK in some areas of the country tried to be a means of reform, fighting the decline in morality and using the symbol of the cross. Klan targets were bootleggers, wife beaters, and immoral movies. In some communities, it achieved a certain respectability as it worked with politicians. So this is laying the groundwork for the fact that the KKK has long been sanitized and normalized to protect what it actually is, and this all to go back to what we're seeing now with Nolan Wells and so many other instances of Black people being killed, and it is just not even handled at all because this has never been addressed. We have let every generation inherit the sins of his father, and we have a duty to take responsibility for the sins of our fathers.
Can
I
I
say that as somebody who's a half Vietnamese refugee immigrant and still feel that duty because I've benefited from white supremacy.
Can
Go
I
ahead,
jump in here really quickly? I think there's a
please.
lot of people who are Trump voters who say, well, like the president doesn't have anything to do with like downstream consequences. That's absolute bullshit. And I'll tell you why. Because of the historical precedent Mag is discussing right now. In the early, in like the 1900s, like when lynching was epidemic, we talk about Ida B. Wells a bit on this podcast, who happened to be the great grandmother of Nolan Wells, who was with, like one of the country's first investigative journalists whose work from Chicago helped end, helped bring attention to uh, lynchings and the crime of them. And um, but it's important to note that when she was doing that work, the reason why lynchings in the KKK were endemic or an epidemic at the time was because Woodrow Wilson was a huge supporter. President Woodrow Wilson was a huge supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. He screened the movie Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffiths in the White House, and he basically created a permission structure for these racist pieces of shit to operate at local and municipal levels and state levels. And a lot of people are saying, well, like, yeah, no, but that wasn't a problem the after the 20s. No, that's wrong. It's always been a problem. And it's not just endemic in the South either. It's I don't know if I'm using the word endemic or epidemic, but wrong or correctly here, so correct me if I'm wrong,
I actually don't know.
but it's this has never gone away, and we'll be talking about the 60s and the 70s, but a lot of people think that the Ku Klux Klan is inherently something that happens in the South. It happens everywhere. There was a strong Ku Klux Klan chapter in Atlantic City in the 1920s. In the 1980s, during the Boston busing riots, where inner city kids were being bused to schools in an effort to further desegregate schools because they were basically redlined. David Duke, who was a Ku Klux Klan guy who ran for president, actually went to South Boston, and there is a famous picture of a black man being stabbed by a American flag. Uh, And yeah, so this shit never left. It's been here the whole time. And the only way we can bring it away is if we. Did you turn the banner off, Meg?
Yeah, I'm adding a content warning.
Oh, good idea. I forgot about that. The only reason why, the only reason way we can fight this is if we expose the truth of it. And you know, if you're one of those people who's like, well, the civil rights movement happened and then it was kumbaya, then you should be prepared to be uncomfortable and you should be listening with all ears because I know that there are a lot of people, especially people that voted for Trump, that are all about Martin Luther King Jr. And then as soon as that's over, then they go back into the same shit that's been happening in terms of white supremacy for the last for since the beginning of this country, basically.
Yeah. So let's actually, so I think like what's really important for people to understand is that like the line from early policing, slave patrols, KKK to now, um, it's all like one through line that has just never been addressed. And that's why abolitionists want to abolish the police state. It's not that they want to abolish ways to keep people safe, they want to abolish the system that keeps being rewritten in different ways to ultimately protect the status quo. And that goes all the way back to the beginning. My Google Doc is being weird, but do you want to talk about like what were they called? Lantern laws? Do you know anything about lantern laws?
No. Well, hang on a second. I feel like it has to do with early policing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Lantern laws refer to the 18th century legal code in New York City that mandated black, mixed race, and indigenous people carry candle lanterns while walking the streets after dark and not in the company of a white person. That is pretty racist. Uh,
Mm-hmm. So that was like the start of policing, really.
oh
Like,
wait, can I just hit this guy Dennis Moore real quick before I ban him?
uh-huh.
Dennis Moore, 1783. 14 people got shot this weekend, and last people, 20 people got shot. Six fatal. This happened in Chicago. Democrats and liberal cities dangerous. Okay. Dennis, 1783 is the year in your thing. Dennis Moore. First thing I'm going to remind you, sir, is that that lease on your pickup truck is the reason why your credit score is lower than your cholesterol. Second of all, make sure you're taking better care of your teeth because that is a precursor to heart disease. Now, to get to the substance of your argument, which is that Chicago is dangerous under the most liberal mayor, leftist mayor we've had, crime's at an all time low in Chicago. It's never been this low since the 1960s. And part of the reason that is because Brandon Johnson has set up social programs that allows people to, yeah, be safe. There are a lot of avenues for people to go spend time, a lot of third spaces. So, yeah, actually, not only are you wrong about Chicago being poorly managed under a leftist, it's pretty clear that you're jealous because you live next to a TJ Maxx in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. So, take Chicago out your mouth and see you later.
I also
Sorry,
want to
Meg.
add, no, it's okay. I also want to add that until we actually address all aspects of the system, we are going to see the the byproducts of a racial system over and over and over, no matter who's in office, and that's why this conversation is important. So, to get back to the timeline, policing in America, we talked about lantern laws in New York. If you were a person of color or mixed, you had to have a candlelight with you if you were not accompanied by a white person. So that was the North. In the South, the Carolinas had their first organized slave patrols in this country, which were armed militias whose entire job was controlling enslaved people by catching runaways, breaking up any gatherings that they felt could be suspicious, and disciplining Black people, enslaved people, without any official court process. So that was like the earliest form of policing in the South. And then in the North, it was the lantern laws. So these patrols could enter any home without a warrant just because they were suspicious, whether you were Black or white, like they thought you were maybe an ally. How's it, you know? Their reasonable suspicion standard to this day is still what causes a lot of harm.
It hasn't. It
Um,
hasn't. It hasn't changed since then.
right. No, really, you're right. Um, so meanwhile, in the north, the municipal police continued to develop kind of on a separate track where it was their responsibility. They were like, it was just like all the wealthy people of the north had police working for them to keep immigrants and laborers in control so that they wouldn't unionize, they wouldn't they wouldn't strike, they wouldn't cause any uprisings. They just wanted to keep immigrants and workers in control. So that's what the north was doing, while the south was on, protect. So it's all been about protecting capital for the wealthiest. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so then after the Civil War,
Oh,
Mississippi
and can I just
developed.
say, something? Add something really quickly. It's part of the reason why, like, people who deny the fact that systemic racism is real is, like, this is all about protecting capital, and since race was so uh, contingent on, we were basically not basically, it was people were doing all of that labor and we're not being paid for it. So,
Mhm,
and the way that that was determined was by race. So therefore, if capitalism, protecting capital, is a function of race, then therefore racism is systemic, and it always has been, and it will be until we recreate the system. Right, Meg?
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I don't remember what I was thinking. I was
Sorry,
thinking.
I didn't mean to cut you off. You
No,
were
no,
talking
no. You're
about.
okay. Oh, I was thinking. I kind of want to chew gum. I'm gonna get into the black codes in Mississippi in 1965. If you know anything about that, I want to talk about that. Otherwise, I'm gonna go look for gum. If you want to keep going off. BRB.
Yeah. So I don't know about this, but I will kind of let everybody know what was happening in terms of we're gonna kind of connect, do some connective. I'm gonna do some connective stuff. Basically, 1920s, we have this resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. We have the New Deal by Franklin Roosevelt, which basically helped lift poor white people out of poverty, but it did not include any reparative steps be taken on behalf of people of color. So they were largely left behind. Sharecropper system is still very much intact, which is just an extension of modern day slavery. Uh, Franklin Roosevelt did not desegregate the armed forces. That was Harry S. Truman after the war. And so there was a large number of people of color who fought the Nazis, came back, and realized that we still lived in Nazi Germany, part of the country. Then obviously 40s, 50s, Emmett Till is assassinated or is
Okay,
murdered
we
in.
can get into that. Let's rewind so we're not jumping everywhere. Hi, I'm back. I couldn't find gum, but I could find a non-alcoholic beverage.
Well, you were at 1965, so
I was
I
on
was getting.
1865.
Oh, 1865? I thought you said
It's
1965.
okay.
My bad, my bad.
It's
All
okay.
right,
It's
all
okay.
right.
Okay. So after the Civil War, the slave patrols, who again were just militias going around terrorizing Black people and their allies, they became the sheriffs. So Mississippi passed Black codes to criminalize vagrancy, a lot of laws that they could just recapture any Black person and put them back into plantations and enslavement because the 13th or 14th Amendment. Um, Slavery is abolished
13th,
except unless it is
a
because
function of
you
punishment.
are a bunch. So, yes, so they would just punish people for anything they wanted. So, that is what those slave patrols became sheriffs. And then that fed straight into convict leasing. So, they would take people in that they accused of whatever they wanted, lease them out to corporations so they could continue enslavement.
So this
And
started happening in the 1860s?
yes, 1865. So
Jesus.
then there was all like, so, okay, so there was the Parchment Farm, which opened in 1904. There's a book about it, and it's called Worse Than Slavery. They leased prisoners as young as 6 or 7 years old, and 15% of their imprisoned people died in a year just doing railroad and levee work alone. Um, the governor who built it James K. Vardaman, said outright that he wanted to run it like an efficient slave plantation and to instill respect for white authority. So that was 1904. So
Jesus.
so again, at what point was racism addressed here? Not ever, not at all. Um, Rewinding a little bit, 1875, Reconstruction is starting to happen. After the Civil War, Mississippi started to have a biracial elected government. Black men were serving in office for the first time in the state's history. So in 1875, an armed white paramilitary group called the Red Shirts violently overthrew it. Up to 300 people alone during one of these riots were killed. And Grant hesitated to send federal troops because he was worried about being accused of bayonet rule. Nobody was ever prosecuted for killing 300 people in order to stop Black people from getting into government. Um,
Jesus.
so then, from then to 1968, lynching had just been a policy. Mississippi recorded more documented lynchings than any other state in the country. Conservative counts, at least over 581 from 1877 to 1968. I'm sure that is a very low number. And this wasn't just mob violence, this was law enforcement. This is how law enforcement worked because it went from slave patrols to sheriffs to militias to do all of the bidding to maintain white supremacy. And it was how social and economic order was maintained. Local law enforcement either would participate or would look away when it happened. Again, when did this ever stop? Haven't found it yet. So then you get to
Mm-hmm.
so then between 1968, oh, okay. So then within that time, there's a lot of lynching still happening. Obviously, it is the policy. 1955, you get to Emmett Till. Do you want to get into Emmett Till's story?
Yeah. Emmett Till was he was he's a young kid from the south side of Chicago, and he was visiting family in Mississippi. And it's alleged, no one can verify this because it's really just uh, the only people who have spoken to it are the people that were directly involved in it. But uh, apparently, he whistled at a white woman in Mississippi because he was just hanging out outside of a store. And then that woman told her husband and the rest of his family, and then later that night they went and they beat him brutally and killed him. And he was like a 10-year-old kid. I have to look at the actual. He was young. He was just an innocent kid, and he was this woman basically told her husband and her family that this kid whistled and at her, and it was a black kid, and then they felt emboldened to murder him in the worst way possible. So his body was brought back to Chicago, and the funeral was the visitation. Like you could see, it was an open casket. His mother insisted on being an open casket, and he was unrecognizable. And a lot of people say that that was what kicked off the civil rights movement in earnest because of the outrage, rightfully, for what they had done to this poor boy. It's really sad. And if you look at the pictures, though, it's really of the funeral and the visitation and just what a profound effect this had on the psyche, uh, starting in Chicago and then spreading across the country. Uh, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, what did I miss, Meg? And I'm pretty sure that the woman he whistled at is still alive, and she has not been tried for her, basically for conspiracy to get this kid killed. Um, so, yet another example of uh, un- unresolved.
Yeah.
There's no justice.
Yeah. And I think like so if we um right now there I don't know if you remember Trey Reed. He's somebody who was found hanging in a tree at a college in Mississippi about a year ago. His family had to fight so hard to get any answers. Right now, we have Nolan Wells. His family is dealing with like so much, like, people are writing terrible reviews about his mother, who's a nurse. Like, these parents are having to fight so hard for justice, the same as like Emmett Till's mother had to fight for her own son. It, and meanwhile, the system just protects the perpetrators while the people
Mm-hmm.
who are it's really gutting. Like, yeah. So that was 1955. After that, you get to COINTELPRO, um, which, do you want to explain COINTELPRO?
Yeah. So, COINTELPRO was a CIA program that basically authorized the domestic surveillance of many people who were deemed radicals. People like Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King Jr. I think John Lennon had a file. And so basically, what it was designed to do specifically is to split and segment the left into different uh, splinters, for lack of a better term, so that it would never unite. And it involved a lot of misinformation. It involved a lot of kind of factionalism. I'm pretty sure that there was an example of like Gloria Steinem being told not to talk about economics. Like the CIA's, the person who was in charge of CIA counterintelligence was named it's the character that Matt Damon's character in The Good Shepherd is based off. His name was Jesus Angleton, and he was actually a poet laureate from Yale, and so he understood that a large part of counterintelligence, or in this case, fascism, was maintaining cultural stranglehold on insurgent progressive movements. So, whether they were talking about undermining Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, or they were talking about undermining Fred Hampton in Chicago, there was always this CIA-backed domestic intelligence operation that was basically just screwing everything up internally. And then I think in 1978, the Pentagon Papers were released, which is how we had proof that people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael were all being surveilled by the FBI. I mean, Fred Hampton was assassinated by the FBI and the Chicago Police Department. There's
Mm-hmm.
proof to that. It's indisputable fact at this point. Uh, for those of you who don't know who Fred Hampton is, he was the chairman of the Black Panthers Party in Rockford, Illinois. He went to speak at the trial of the Chicago Seven in 1968, and from there he was uniting uh, different working class coalitions within the city, the White Patriots, Black Panthers. There was a Latino movement, American Indian
The Young
movement.
Lords.
The Young Lords, thank you, in Humble
Mm-hmm.
Park. Shout out to Humble Park. And Fred Hampton basically got these groups together and helped everybody understand that the only way to get united was if we did it around economic circumstances. And as soon as he started doing that, everybody started freaking out. J. Edgar Hoover basically greenlit him from that point on because he kind of had cracked the code,
So,
which is
some interesting things. What I have pulled up right now is the Senate report from COINTELPRO. It's 1,000 pages. I've been reading it for fun because it is fascinating. One thing that the Senate found was that none of their labels actually had any meaning. The Bureau's titles for its programs should not be accepted uncritically. They imply a precision of definition and targeting that did not even exist. Even the names of the later programs had no clear definition. The Black Nationalist Program, according to its supervisors, included a great number of organizations that you might not today characterize as Black nationalists, but were primarily Black. Indeed, the Nonviolent Southern Christian Leadership Conference was labeled a Black nationalist hate group. They couldn't even define the new left except as more or less an attitude. Furthermore, the actual targets were chosen from a broad group of names the programs would imply. So even when they say COINTELPRO was only going after Black terrorists, they literally were not. Like, the fucking Senate committee found that they were just referring to Black majority spaces and groups. But this has a lot because, like, the findings versus what COINTELPRO was saying, like, the Senate really rips them alive. And this was not a woke Senate. Like, if we were to redo these hearings, I'd be so interested. Um,
Yeah, it was a pretty strong reaction to the Pentagon Papers. I mean, Carter was president. He was pretty progressive
yeah.
by those standards, and they were reacting to Ford and Nixon. So, um, probably did more than we've seen in the last 30 years in terms of like fighting back against violating everybody's Fourth Amendment rights.
Another interesting thing is, like, they talk about the definition of preventing violence because they claimed COINTELPRO was to prevent violence. But they found that there there was like very little documentation of any of these groups perpetuating any violence, but they were saying, well, they have the potential to be violent if they're in larger numbers. They just assume Black people are going to be violent in large numbers, and that is why we are preventing violence. This is violence prevention. It is actually like, what the fuck? The prevention of violence, and this is what the Senate said. The prevention of violence is clearly not in itself an improper purpose. Preventing violence is the ultimate goal of most law enforcement. Prosecution and sentencing are intended to deter future criminal behavior, not only of the subject, but also others who might break the law. When the government goes beyond traditional law enforcement and attacks group membership and advocacy, it treads on ground forbidden by the Constitution. So this was all unconstitutional, but either way, this did a lot to Black. It was this total surveillance, fracturing any unity happening between Black communities and other communities, especially like across coalition, turning people against each other, infiltrators, making sure people were fighting each other so that they just could not advance. And we're like still living in the aftermath of that today. When COINTELPRO got rid of the Black Panthers, it left a gap where there was nobody in communities to protect them. So that's how we got the Bloods and Crips, right? Like, all of this is an extension of the fucking government fucking with these communities and then
Yeah,
criminalizing them in the aftermath of it.
can I just say, yeah,
Infuriating.
can I add on to that?
Please.
There's one of the biggest street gangs in the city of Chicago is called the Blackstones, and they used to be called the Black Pea Stone Rangers, also known as El Rukins. It was founded by a guy named Jeff Fort, and in the 1960s, it was like kind of created in the tradition of the Black Panther Party as kind of like a youth and development organization for young black men on the south side of Chicago. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. came to the south side of Chicago and told all these guys who wanted to go out and fight people because they were going to go into a parade. He told them, he's like, I'm going to go out. He went and played pool with the Blackstones. And Martin Luther King used to be a pool hustler. And so he beat them all in pool, and then he sat down with them and he was like, hey, like, I'm going to go on this thing. Uh, and somebody's going to throw a brick at me, and I'm not going to fight back, and neither are you guys. And so they went and did that. But then COINTELPRO happens, and yeah, so they split these organizations up. They became street gangs, and then in the '80s, what ended up happening is they started using RICO cases like they had for the Italian mob to break up Chicago street gangs. So basically, what happened is like people like Jeff Fort and Larry Hoover and David Barksdale all were sent to prison under RICO indictments, and then Chicago gangs didn't have a centralized authority, and so then that's where you get all the different like cliques and like block to block violence because these organizations no longer had central leadership structures. So it's all downstream from fucking politics and the CIA people. Like, everything has a cause and effect. And as Saul Alinsky says in Rules for Radicals, young men, when left to their own devices, always revert to fascism. So if you remove good intentions and good faith actors, or you corrupt them, or you splinter them, then bad faith takes over. And that's what the CIA was banking on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you have the 1964 summer of, I can't remember what it was called. Freedom Summer. So that is when 1,000 volunteers went down to Mississippi to help with voting registration and to protect people who were being targeted by, mobs. A lot of them were white Northern college students from middle or upper class backgrounds. They prepared volunteers to register Black voters, teach literacy and civics at Freedom schools, and promote Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. 1 week after the first group of volunteers arrived, 3 civil rights workers were reported missing. James Chaney, a Black Mississippian, and 2 white Northerners, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman, disappeared while visiting Mississippi, Mississippi, so a city in Mississippi.
Interesting story about Michael. Keep going.
Okay. To investigate the burning of a church, the abduction of 3 civil rights workers intensified the activists' fears, but they still moved ahead. Voter registration was the cornerstone of the summer project. Although approximately 17,000 Black residents attempted to register to vote, only 1,600 completed the applications, and only 1,600 of the applications were accepted by local registrars. Out of how many? 17,000 Black residents registered to vote, and only 1,600 completed applications were accepted, highlighting the need for federal voting rights legislation. This also ended in someone being killed, with a sheriff kind of sitting back and just letting it
It was the two
happen.
guys from the north.
Do you
Actually,
want
the
to
guy.
give that story? I don't know a ton about that story.
Yeah. So there were two young civil rights. They were white guys from New York that went down there to help out with the registration drive, and one of them, Michael, aka Mickey, was a guy who, Robert Reich, the economist. He's really big on like social programs, social safety net, taxing the rich. He worked in the Clinton administration and has since written books denouncing the work he did for them and working to correct things like NAFTA and wealth inequality that he exacerbated by his time in that administration. But he actually went to school with the guy named Michael, who was the young man who was killed by local law enforcement. They were driving around, they got pulled out of a car, and they were killed. And because they were white, it really, obviously this had been happening to Black civil rights leaders for decades, but because they were white, it really helped. Unfortunately, that's what it took to kind of amplify just how bad it was, and how unjust it was. Um, but yeah, no, this guy apparently, Mickey, is part of the reason why this guy Robert Reach has, Robert Reach is like 5 foot, like he's very small, so people used to pick on him. And this guy was a civil rights worker who had been killed by the local sheriffs. He had protected this guy, and he said he had always remembered that, and like when he was in school and things like that. And that was kind of the reason that he got into public service in the first place, is because this guy who had protected him on the schoolyard was assassinated in Philadelphia, Mississippi, for just trying to get people registered to vote. And yeah, I think that was another one where they didn't really. I don't know that they ever held the people accountable to justice. Like, I know they definitely got pulled over by cops at night, and they were assassinated. Uh,
Mhm.
and I mean, there's millions of stories like this too. Like, I don't think that you can. There's not just one story that encapsulated. It's just like Medgar Evers is another one. Like, just thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions. Like, I don't know. It's just crazy to me, the scope of it.
Mhm.
And it's never gone away. It's never
Mhm.
stopped. We've never said never again with this
Right.
problem.
It's an ongoing genocide. Like,
Yeah.
we don't talk about chattel slavery as it is, which is a genocide, and then the continued ethnic cleansing through our criminalization system.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after what you just talked about, Benjamin Brown was killed. He was a Black truck driver from Jackson, Mississippi, and he was a part of the Freedom Rides. He left a nearby cafe and police shot him. He was struck in the head, back, and legs and died the next morning, which was his 22nd birthday. Nobody was ever held accountable for that. Um, After that, you had the Jackson State killings. 460 rounds in 1970, 460 rounds were fired into a dorm. 2 people killed, Gibbs and Green, no prosecutions. And then you had the war on drugs, which, as we know, was also a way to target Black communities. through criminalization and policing. Do you want to get into that?
Uh, Repeat that again. I was just
The war on
processing the
drugs.
400. Oh, the war on drugs. Yes, I
Yeah,
would like you to.
460 fucking rounds into a dorm.
That's
Like,
fucking crazy. That's crazy. Like, and if you look at, and it's similar to like Fred Hampton too. There was like, if you look at the bed that Fred, you can actually go visit the house that Fred Hampton was assassinated in. They still, I think I don't know. His son, Fred Hampton Jr., does a lot of work. His mother was pregnant with him when Fred Hampton was killed. She was laying in bed with Fred Hampton, and if you look at the house, you can look at pictures of the house that Fred Hampton was assassinated in. He was laying in bed asleep, and I just can't think of 460 rounds. Yeah, so the war on drugs. Okay, so let me set the stage for you. It's the 1980s.
71.
Well, 1971 is when Nixon announced. Yeah, okay. So basically, what happened was Nixon gives this address in 1971 saying that the greatest scourge to American youth is drugs. So he announces this war on drugs. The DEA is founded. Uh, the DEA is Drug Enforcement Agency, basically the extrajudicial arm of American soft power in South America. It basically gave us jurisdiction to jump into places like Colombia, Nicaragua, places in Central and South America that had part of the cocaine trade. The reason why this is important is because a lot of paramilitary groups in South America, like FARC in Colombia, use the drug trade to, fund insurgencies. Because they were fighting back against U.S. installed dictators that were trained at the School of the Americas, which is a school that the CIA set up in South America specifically to train fascist dictators that could stop the threat of communism. I'm using quotes because none of these countries really had a communist anything. They were just people that wanted to do things like nationalize resources that had been historically repatriated or had been taken by white landowners like United Fruit Company and oil companies like in Venezuela, stuff like that. Basically, the Cuban Revolution kind of gave everybody a mind fuck. So they create the School of the Americas. There's the DEA. In the 1980s, that's where you kind of see the marriage of the CIA, the war on drugs, and the 13th Amendment come to fruition because Ronald Reagan gets in office, and him and all of his buddies are just talking about privatizing everything, and they're talking about the menace of communism. So they decided to start privatizing federal prisons. Then crack cocaine comes onto the scene. Now, for those of you who don't know about the history of crack cocaine, there is a lot of substantial evidence to suggest that crack cocaine was developed by the CIA and introduced into black and brown communities specifically so that they could fund the Nicaraguan Contras. There is irrefutable proof of this. If you want to look at the grand jury testimony of Placido Rondon, who was Freeway Rick Ross in LA, who was basically the person who is credited as having started selling crack in South Central Los Angeles. This guy, Placido Rondon, was connected to the Nicaraguan Contras, who were the people that were against communism. And they were death squads, basically. And in order for the CIA, because remember, we were coming off of the 1978 Pentagon Papers, in order for the CIA to continue to do shady shit like fund war crimes, they had to do it and get money in ways that Congress couldn't see the money. And what better way to do that than selling rock cocaine to poor people? So Placido Rondon taught Rick Ross how to cook crack, and the crack cocaine epidemic took off. Now, there was a journalist named Gary Webb who wrote for the San Jose Mercury News who was covering the story and mysteriously took his own life. He wrote a book called The Dark Alliance, and there's still a lot of proof of it outside of that. I mean, if you guys want to look into the Iran-Contra scandal, that was proof of just how far we were willing to go to protect our capital in South America. But the war on drugs and unfair sentencing laws are also born out of the crack cocaine epidemic, which basically said that if you are caught with an ounce of powder cocaine, you are going to be held accountable the same way as someone who is caught with a $10 crack rock, which is insane because an ounce of powder cocaine, which is typically associated with upper class, rich white users, is enough cocaine to sell and be a drug dealer, basically. A $10 rock is something that the poorest, most marginalized people were relying on as Reagan's administration was gutting blue collar jobs and unions where these people likely would have had careers had Reagan not sent everything overseas. So when I say Ronald Reagan fucking sucks, I mean it definitively. Top to bottom. Him and his friends, not only did they strip middle and urban America of their ability to make a living, he also introduced nefarious substances and actors into society in order to then exploit those people who, obviously, if you get caught with a $10 crack rock and you have to go to jail for 10 years, Reagan and all of his buddies who own those privatized prisons because of the 13th Amendment and the exploitation that allows it to enslave people, uh, that that's why it's very frustrating to me. Sorry. I
No,
think
no,
I
no.
did my best to be concise, but it's
No,
just
that was great. I
infuriating.
think I want to add like some more historical context under Nixon and Reagan because it also
Please.
falls into all of this, which is that after Brown versus Board passed and schools had to desegregate, there was a big effort from white Southerners who wanted to maintain segregation. And so then they opened their segregation academies, which we talked about, and I'll get in a little more. But because were not getting, um, they weren't getting the political support that they needed to protect segregation, they tried to figure out how to break into politics. So Kevin Phillips, who developed Southern strategy, was he was Richard Nixon's strategist behind his campaign. And so what he did was take
Oh.
dog whistles about states' rights, about keeping the elites out of our schools, about protecting our
Small
families from
government.
crime, so that it would not sound blatantly racist to Northerners who felt left behind by an elitist government, and Southerners would be like, "Oh yeah, we know what states' rights is. We know what small government is. That means that if we want to keep segregation, we can keep segregation." So that is when the Republican Party and the Democratic Party actually created an actual split because it wasn't that clearly split before. The Republican Party became the party about, under it all, being able to pass legislation that protected white supremacy. So that is how he got Nixon to win. It was through Southern strategy by using dog whistles. And I actually also think another thing that people don't realize is like people online get so mad when more progressive candidates say things that like are a little more moderate or a little more fleshed out. And the reason, I mean, sometimes it's because they're fucking ops and we don't like them. And sometimes it's because like the same strategy is we need to bring in as many people as possible because they're being fed so much bullshit. We cannot reach them without using a little bit of their language. We can't reach them when we're saying abolish the police. We can't reach them. So it's like, if you like, that's where people just, it's like, play the strategy game. Okay. If there's
Well,
a
and
good
that's
faith
the
actor,
thing
you
is
know
that
they
you can
are.
abolish the police by you can defund the police. You can divert resources that are going towards tanks in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and you can put that back into public health and public schools that serve underprivileged communities, which is going to disproportionately uh, have reparative effects on people of color. And once you've gotten underprivileged people taken care of, whether they're black or white, then no one's really going to complain about the police not having a tank anymore. You know what I mean? Like, but if you know what I'm saying, like that's what I get really pissed off about, like people who are absolutist about somebody taking a pragmatic line when it comes to the
Mm-hmm.
messaging on shit. It's
When
like, yeah,
otherwise their actual policies are what we need. Like,
exactly, exactly. It's
yeah.
like let them play the fucking game. Like let them play the
Mm-hmm.
game. Let them play the
And
game, and let's see how it plays out.
a lot of that has to do with the after effects of COINTELPRO because one of the 5 goals of COINTELPRO was to avoid legitimizing far left ideologies by having moderates who espouse those ideologies. So then they would kind of pick their own moderate to like kind of take the language and put it in. So that's why you see right now, like they're pushing Slotkin as if she, like trying to get her to be like, look, she cares about affordability. So that like there's a lot of mistrust because COINTELPRO has been fucking with trust by installing their own people. And now we don't know who to trust when they have to appeal to bring in a broader coalition. And it is just a mess and it's hard. And I get that. So that is Nixon. And then meanwhile, the Heritage Foundation was also organizing to gain political power. Jerry Falwell is one of the moral majority people. He was he owned segregation academies, and I think Liberty University. But
Yeah, Liberty University in Wheaton, Illinois, and his son was the one who got caught with his wife.
that wasn't Wheaton, Illinois. Liberty is in the Virginia, Pennsylvania, somewhere like that.
I think it's in Wheaton.
You
Oh no,
want to
maybe
look it
Wheaton
up?
College. Maybe Wheaton College
Yeah,
is.
Wheaton College is different, um, but Ronald Reagan, they got him elected on their platform, which was their version of Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation also wrote Project 2025. So this is like all one line that comes full circle. And it also reminds us that these motherfuckers have been organized for a long time, decades, just to protect capital and white supremacy. While meanwhile, they have been intentionally fracturing the left. And so we have to do a lot of work to overcome all of the factions and the fractures to have a standing chance at fighting them. So I kind of went through some of the curriculums, but so like this is the segregation academies. It's the segregationists who really like built all of this infrastructure at first and then aligned with like the women's rights, anti-women's rights groups because they're like, oh, abortion could be a really good wedge issue and all of that. But while this is going on, they have schools, they're developing curriculums, they're getting these curriculums into Christian schools saying things like slavery provided educated Southerners the time to better themselves intellectually. Pre-colonial Africa was the dark continent, unexplored and unimportant. And this is the BJU curriculum is explicitly a segregation academy one. Anyways, so again, now we are in the 70s. At what point have we addressed racism? Never, never, literally never. Like, and it just keeps I don't, when people say like this isn't a race issue, this is never stopped being a race issue. And
No, it
I just
absolutely is, and it never stopped being an ace. Like one of the most infuriating like shit lib news moments is when George Stephanopoulos woke up the day after Obama was elected and said racism is over in America.
yeah.
Like, and that was in 2008. And you know how long it took Barack Obama to do the bare minimum about addressing unfair sentencing standards that were created in the 1980s around crack and powder cocaine? It took him like, he didn't do that until like his later in his second term because it's so entrenched. And I mean, think about the 90s, the super predator laws that Joe Biden made his name on. Like, that whole thing with the Central Park Five, where Donald Trump was taking out full page ads in a New York Times calling for the lynching of 5 innocent black men who had nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This has never gone away. It's only ever been selectively focused on by corporate media. And they ignore it long enough to let people think that it goes away so that you keep buying toothpaste and boner pills. But it's still there. It always will be until we talk about it.
And I think that's why, like, I understand why people say they're trying to make this a race war when it's a class war. And that is true
BRB.
To an extent. Okay. That's true to an extent because this started as a means to maintain separation of classes by introducing race. And we are never going to be able to get to the class war part until we address the race part. This actually happened. What was it? Bacon's Rebellion? I'm echoing now. Steve, I'm going to have to mute you. Mute. Okay. Bacon's Rebellion. Is anyone familiar with Bacon's Rebellion? I'm going to pull something up on it. Let me see. Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion let me share screen. Actually, I'm just going to move Steve. Remove from stage. Okay. What should I do? Share screen. Okay. So Bacon's Rebellion was in 1676. It was the first stirring of revolutionary sentiment in America. But historians have come to understand that Bacon's rebellion was a power struggle between two stubborn, selfish leaders than a glorious fight against tyranny. The central figures in Bacon's rebellion were opposites: Berkeley, who was 70 when the crisis began and a veteran of the English Civil Wars, a frontier Indian fighter, a king's favorite. And what is a frontier Indian? Is this even a good source, National Park Service? I think they usually are. Berkeley's antagonist, young Nathaniel Bacon Jr., was actually Berkeley's cousin by marriage. Blah, 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 blah. Bacon was a troublemaker and a schemer whose father sent him to Virginia in the hope he would mature. Although disdainful of labor, Bacon was intelligent and eloquent. Upon Bacon's arrival, Berkeley treated his young cousin with respect and friendship. Okay, myriad of causes, all which led to dissent in the economy. Economic problems such as declining tobacco prices, growing commercial competition from Maryland and the Carolinas, increasingly restricted English market, and the rising prices from English manufactured goods caused problems for Virginians. There were heavy English losses in the latest series of naval wars with the Dutch. Oh, I'll add you back. I muted you, so you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Can I get behind the scenes photos?
Okay, I unmuted you. I feel like this is not the right version of Bacon's Rebellion. But I guess I can keep reading it. Okay. So blah blah blah. So the difficulties encouraged the colonists to find a scapegoat against whom they could vent their frustrations and blame for their misfortunes, which I would say economic problems usually have to do with the fucking ruling class. But let's find a scapegoat. Okay, the colonists found their scapegoat in the form of local Native Americans, indigenous people.
Are you talking about Bacon's Rebellion right now?
Yeah, I feel like this is a weird source. I don't really
Yeah,
like
but
the
that's
way it's explaining
crazy
it.
because they did blame price inequality on oh
Indigenous
shit,
people?
man.
Like, what is
Yeah.
what?
It's the same shit. It's the same shit. This is why they told Kamala to stop talking about high prices and price gouging, and they made her start talking about like small business tax credits for somebody that wants to buy diapers.
I feel like the NPS used to have a good article about this, and it is now very strange. But it was last updated 2015, it says. But basically, Bacon's Rebellion was when Bacon demanded a commission to fight off the Indians. When none was forthcoming, he led volunteers against Virginia's closest Indian allies. This led to a civil war, pitting Bacon's followers against the Berkeley loyalists. The conflict was often bitter and personal. At one point, Berkeley dared Bacon to kill him, and it also involved a lot of looting by both rebel and loyalist properties. Berkeley expelled Bacon from the council, reinstated him, expelled him again, blah, blah, blah. Anyways,
So what you're saying is that there is a long tradition of scapegoating poor people for the exploitation of poor
I
people.
feel like nobody's talking about the thing about Bacon's Rebellion is that before Bacon's Rebellion, we had white indentured servants, right? And then we
Yeah.
had enslaved Africans. And they banded together under Bacon's Rebellion to fight off what they were who they were pitted against was indigenous people, right? I feel like I'm not seeing
Yeah.
that anywhere. I'm not seeing that anywhere right now, which is really
Did
wild.
they answer? Did they DEI wipe it? I
I
feel like
don't
you all need to go to
know.
the Wayback Machine. There's like an Internet Archive website that has like the pre DEI purge internet. You all would love it. Because it doesn't involve like Pete Hegseth's curriculum for oh, Jesus Christ. I There's like a lot of examples of this though throughout history. You know, there's that movie, The Big Short, with Steve Carell. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Remember that part at the end of Big Short when they're talking about the subprime mortgage crisis, and he's like, he just made like a $200 million shorting the subprime mortgage market,
Hmm.
and he's just like, I got a feeling. He's like, a feeling of what? And he's like, I got a feeling that instead of putting the people responsible for this in jail, they're going to blame poor people and immigrants. And
Okay, I found the real history. Okay. So
oh, you found the
let's
real history?
let's erase everything I just said. We're going to go through the real history. Other than the fact that Bacon did lead a rebellion against the indigenous people had raided the crops or whatever, which, like, again, this was stolen land. Like, anytime we're framing indigenous people as the problem, we have to realize, like, they are literally stealing their land, killing their people, wiping them out with diseases. Like, they have a right to defend themselves or no? Anyways.
I think so, yeah.
So Bacon wanted the colony to retaliate for raids by indigenous people on frontier settlements and to remove all indigenous people from the colony so landowners like himself could expand their property. Berkeley was afraid that doing that would cause unity among tribes and they would lose against the united tribes. So they wanted to keep the tribes factioned, and part of keeping them factioned was not letting the black and white people fight against them. So it was like
This
a
is
double
why we need to
faction.
teach history. They literally did COINTELPRO in the colonies.
Uh-huh.
This isn't, look at the goosebumps, Meg.
Oh wow.
I got big, you can't see it, but they're
I
big.
can't.
Um,
Okay.
God damn it. This is so frustrating.
So Bacon organized his own militia, which was white and black indentured servants and enslaved black people who joined in exchange for the promise of freedom and attacked nearby tribes. So again, like, I'm not understanding who the real enemy is, but I mean, it's like people joining together for a common cause and understanding that their freedom is intertwined with each other, right? The power struggle ensued with Bacon and his militia on one side and Berkeley and the rest of the colony's elite on the other side. There were a month of conflict. And then in September of 1676, Bacon's militia captured Jamestown and burned it to the ground. Bacon died of fever a month later, and the rebellion fell apart. But Virginia's plantation owners were so shaken by the fact that a rebel militia could unite black and white servants and slaves and that they could destroy capital. So, because they were so fearful of a multi-race alliance, Bacon's rebellion spread far and wide, and several more uprisings of a similar type followed all over the colonies. In an effort to protect their superior status and economic position, the plantation owners shifted their strategy in order to maintain dominance. They abandoned their reliance on indentured servants and instead of using indentured servants who were white, they imported more black enslaved people from Africa. Then they decided to make a legal distinction between black and white inhabitants by permanently enslaving Virginians of African descent and giving poor white indentured servants new rights and new statuses, such as they could have some home ownership, they could be a little more free, and that way they see a distance between themselves and black people, and they could never again unite and take down capital. So soon after Bacon's rebellion, they increasingly distinguish people of African descent and European descent, and they increasingly give some power to independent white farmers and landholders.
Yeah,
And
I think
that
it's
is when
important.
this started.
I just want to make a quick little jump in here to 1940s Germany. Adolf Hitler went on record many times saying that a lot of his policies were inspired by colonial America and how we treated indigenous people in America, like the systemic
And
extermination.
Jim Crow.
Yeah. So like people, yeah, they tend to gloss over that fact when they talk about Adolf Hitler, but he was a prolific reader of Western novels specifically. So yeah, this all sounds pretty like Nuremberg laws, doesn't it? You know, like
Mhm.
racial laws and all that stuff. There's this good documentary about it's about street art in Northern Ireland. And there was this one guy who participated in the peace processes. He was like a councilman in West Belfast where the Protestants lived. And he's like, listen, the thing about my constituents is that they're poor white trash. And he's like, there's nothing that poor white trash likes more than being one step above, one rung above the poorest, whitest trash on the ladder. And it's stupid. And he's like, this is what they get to divide working people is shit like this. Catholics versus Protestants. Like, and that was why Fred. That's why everybody freaked out with Fred Hampton because he was like, um, he saw through it. He saw the division, divide and conquer. It's literally what they say. I mean, we
I
can talk a
think.
little bit. We can talk a little bit about the
Well, I want to
Incas.
get more into Fred Hampton actually because what what the commission, what the Senate commission found was that what was most threatening was somebody who could unite across racial divides. And the young patriots who were migrants from Appalachia at the time, their emblem was a Confederate flag. And he still, even though he got a lot of pushback, he still wanted to unite with them because he knew that ultimately they would learn that they had a common enemy and the overlords. And I mean, and it went both ways. The young patriots were also like, oh, what are these violent, whatever, but maybe we do need to unite. And he did lose some support because of it. And we're seeing a lot, like at some point, we have to. Coalitions are not safe spaces. We do need to have safe spaces. We do need to have boundaries with people who are unsafe. And also, we need to figure out how we can build bridges across divides. Like, who is
Can
willing to be the bridge between these people so that we can all start to work together?
can I give you everybody a little bit more context about that alliance between the White Patriots and the Black Panthers? So,
Mm-hmm.
just to give you an idea of just how like Confederate these guys were. I used to work in a warehouse with a guy named Binky, and when I met him, I was like, where are you from? And he's like, I'm from Chicago, uptown, hillbilly heaven. And I'm like, you're not from Chicago, you're from West Virginia or Alabama or something. He's like, nope, I've never even been on a bus. And the reason why Uptown Hillbilly Heaven is called Hillbilly Heaven is because that is where Appalachians moved from West Virginia and the Appalachian Mountain regions to Chicago in order to work in factories during. Oh, we got some Valentards here. I see Michael Parenti is the godfather of Marxist communist thought in the United States, ardent defender of the. Yeah, okay, that's definitely a Chris. That's a Chris Valenti joint, if I've ever seen one. Oh no, wait, no, maybe we're talking about a different. No, Parenti. Never mind. That guy's a different historian. But anyways, so the White Patriots, they were literally from
The young patriots.
Appalachia. Yeah, and they had southern accents. In Chicago, there was a city of neighborhoods, and if you came from uptown, hillbilly heaven, you had a southern accent. Like you had a hillbilly accent. So these guys all sounded like they were from West Virginia. And when Fred Hampton came to speak with them, they were all ardently defensive about this guy coming up there and talking about economic populism. And then he went outside the meeting and the cops started beating him up. And then these guys stepped in and said,
Mhm.
no, he's with us. And then that's when they
Oh
realized
shit.
they're like, oh shit, this guy is with us because he's treating us, they're treating him the same way all the cops and the Pinkertons treated coal miners and their
Ooh, I
families.
just got goosebumps
Yeah,
now.
look, I got goosebumps too.
Woo!
Woo! That's what it's all about. And actually, I met a guy at Netroots from More Perfect Union who lives in West Virginia, and he's going to come to Uptown sometime to talk about Fred Hampton and this alliance. And I hope to have him on the show sometime to talk about it. John Russell, he's got a Substack called The Holler. You should check it out. He always talks about working class issues, and yeah, so like it was pretty crazy though because like it was a bunch of white guys who had a Confederate flag, but they were hillbillies in like the labor sense of the word. Like they believed in economic populism. And that's why on my I have my vote for Zoran button here, and then I have my Fred Hampton sticker button that says we say we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. And that's what freaked everybody out.
Love, 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 love.
We're gonna do a more in-depth thing, and I want to see if we can. I think. Yeah, we'll talk more about Fred Hampton. I want to see if we can get Fred Hampton Jr. on the show.
Let's do it.
Um,
Yeah. No, that'd be so sick. Let's get
Yeah,
that
and they do a lot of
there.
good work at the Fred Hampton House. Like it's kind of like a museum, I think, and there's like a nonprofit that they do work for.
I wonder
so.
if we could do a live stream from there.
Oh, that would be yeah, definitely. And they've tried to condemn the house a couple times, so like I know that they're always looking for help, and they deserve it. It's an important piece of history, Chicago history, American history. Most people don't know that labor organizing started in Chicago.
Back of the yards.
Yep, that's right. Haymarket, the martyrs of Haymarket. Most people know about Chicago labor history in Europe than they do in Chicago, because May 1st, Labor Day, is commemorated to the Haymarket martyrs. But I digress. I feel so much happier that we're talking about history, by the way. It gives me hope. Like I've like almost started crying twice from hope.
Yeah. Well, it's just like a good way to honor the people who have fought before us and situate ourselves in like this is an intergenerational and international fight against the overlords. And we are just one tiny piece of the puzzle. We're not going to take it all down in this generation, but we're going to do what we can to build off of the people before us by learning from them instead of repeating, like they were all fractured on purpose, turned into factions, pitted against each other on purpose. So what can we do? We can unite even when we don't totally agree with someone, because that is what they were most afraid of. And I think that is what gives me hope, is knowing that we have the ability to look at history and do the things that they were not able to do then and build off of the fight that they had, instead of keeping up with the same fight over and over and over.
And it's very important to remember that, like, not only was Fred Hampton talking about this, but he inspired a lot of what other civil rights leaders did afterwards. Like Martin Luther King Jr., his last project was going to be a march on poverty. That's what he was planning. Like Martin Luther King Jr. was like, now we need to expand the scope of this social movement. We need to do what the 1 million person march to Washington, D.C., which was about the civil rights movement. The thing he was going to do before he was assassinated was the march on poverty.
And that's what they were also afraid of too. There were 3 goals in COINTELPRO. One of them was also keeping a Messiah, like making it impossible for any Messiah to come up. Martin Luther King Jr. was listed as one of them, who could broadly unite people who were from moderate to extreme, black, white. Like that was not cool to them. So then he was assassinated.
And it's important to remember when we're talking about COINTELPRO, we're not just talking about how they destabilize these social movements. Like there are very deliberate choices that were made with respect to how the story of the civil rights movement was told. For instance, there was color TV and color stock film, but there is a reason why all the pictures from the civil rights movement were taken in black and white. And I mean, you can't prove it, but like and you can look now, there are still members who have connections to the CIA that are still in mainstream media.
True.
Yeah.
And like so fucking true.
There's this thing that they say in acting. Stella Adler said it, the art is in the choice. And like I said, the guy who created COINTELPRO and was the head of counterintelligence used to be a poet. And there's a reason why there were a lot of societies of like artists and things like that were directly funded by the CIA. And there are a lot of decisions that were made with respect to how this movement was portrayed, and when they use the word terrorist and when they use the word extremist, and why they always presented the Black Panther Party as having carried guns because they wanted to make them look like offensive extremists, when in reality, the only reason that the Black Panthers carried guns was a deterrent because they knew the police could use theirs with impunity, right? The NRA is always
we are not in a free country when the people with the most power and impunity can carry guns and the people who are under the most oppression cannot carry guns. That is not freedom. And that is exactly what the Second Amendment was supposed to be for.
Yeah.
Shocker.
You hear a lot about the NRA. Shocker. You don't hear a lot about the SRA. So are we going to we're going to come back and do more tomorrow, right?
Yeah, this is really fun. Do we want to take a break and turn into, I think tomorrow I wanted to talk about Hayden Panettiere and like Hollywood's history with children, like Shirley Temple, Judy Garland.
Yes. I can do some prep work on that.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow with that.
For those of you who are in Florida right now, please be sure to vote for our guy Oliver Larkin and Angie
Dude, did you
Nixon.
see it? Wait, can I show a video? Have you seen
Yes,
this
please.
yesterday? I don't know if you've seen this, but it is fucking crazy. Okay, let me pull this up. And then I gotta go. My husband's asking where I am.
Tell him you're fixing everything.
I'm fixing the world.
You're fixing the world.
Doing my best. Come on, copy. I'm trying to copy it from my iPad, but I guess I can just.
Here, I think I can find it. Maybe I can't.
I got it. Copy. Paste. Hell yeah. I love how you can go like copy to paste on other. Okay. Share screen. This is like actually crazy.
Yeah, this is hilarious. This is
Israel committing a genocide in
That's
Gaza.
incorrect. That is factually incorrect.
It has
That's
been regarded
propaganda.
by the United Nations and Amnesty International and even Israeli human rights organizations, including B'Tselem. There's
The definition of genocide in the UN has said this, does not apply to what many people might think as a disproportionate wartime action. That's what that is in many people's minds. Genocide is a very specific thing.
In whose minds?
Actually, genocide being committed against Jewish people, not by Israel. And that's just a fact.
I mean, the United Nations recently in Geneva found that the IDF had deliberately targeted women and children. There's been famine conditions imposed over the Gaza Strip by the blockading of aid entering the Strip. There's been indiscriminate bombing of hospitals, of mosques, of churches.
Again, I'm going to have to stop you as that is factually not correct. But I hear you talking about something very important to a lot of people, and certainly who think that way. But as a congressman, and I'm being told we have to wrap. But as a congressman for District 25, I'm hoping your viewers will be able to hear you flesh that out a little more.
Dude, these people, like, excuse?
Yeah, seriously. Well, there you have it, folks. This is why you need to support independent media. So we had a lot of viewers today. We had a very lively chat. This was a lot of fun. We're going to be doing history that they didn't teach you. We're going to be talking about the history that was taught to us. We're going to be...
Or that we learned ourselves.
Or that we learned ourselves.
For the truth.
Yeah. So do us a favor. You can support us by following us on Twitch, YouTube, or Substack. Share this link with one friend, and I will give you a cookie. Meg,
we won't track your data, but we will give you a cookie.
We don't track your data like a real cookie.
Well, this was fun. I enjoyed this. This is much easier than, or not easier, but it can be really hard to just face how awful everything is every day, and like putting ourselves in the grander scheme of things is very helpful. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll talk tomorrow about the way child stars and young starlets are treated, because Hayden Panettiere unfortunately was found not alive yesterday. Another part of this is that her ex-boyfriend is the one who allegedly called the police, and her restraining order on him because he was abusive had just ended a month ago. So there's like a lot there. It's really fucking sad, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. But sad things are easier in the context of history, because then we know that we can do something else going forward, at least learning from history. Okay. All right. Thanks, y'all. Ending stream.